Yeah, just doing that now.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we are recording. So welcome everyone. Thanks for joining today's session. As you know, one of our key areas of focus has and continues to be service providers in the London market. We know how critical it will be for market firms to work with you to support them in making the changes that they need to underpin the success of the London market going forward. For today's session, so looking at the agenda, moving on to the next slide, we'll be covering a number of topics. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Marek Baldi, who's our service provider engagement lead. I'll come on to more details in a moment. We'll also be having an update on the progress of Blueprint 2 from Peter Houston, who's engagement lead at DXC. And then Marek will take us through the approach for ongoing engagement and provide a bit of a guided tour through some of the resource materials that are now available. And they're starting really to answer some of the questions that I know that you've had up until now. Not all of the answers, but really starting on that journey now to getting down into the detail. So to get underway, if I can move on to the next slide, introducing Marek. Now, as you can see from Marek's bio on screen, obviously I'm not going to read that out, but he's got over a dozen years experience in the London market, working for a range of service providers. That really puts Marek in an ideal position to understand your needs and therefore to be able to understand how to support those needs as we move forward. Now, Marek will be picking up ownership of this service providing forum going forward, and we'll be covering the majority of today's session. So I'm sure you'll get to know Marek quite well over the next coming weeks, months, and we'll introduce him into his topics a little bit later. But firstly, I'm hoping that people can see slides on screen. I've just had a note saying that they can't. Is there anyone who can give us an indication of whether they can see the slides?
Yeah, I can see them fine.
Great.
Okay. I can.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see them too.
Fantastic. A few thumbs up. Thanks for letting us know. So we'll carry on in that case. In which case, Peter, could you kick off with providing us a bit of an update on where we are with Blueprint 2, some of the progress and maybe some of the challenges, etc., for this group?
Yeah, so no problem. So hi everyone. My name's Peter Houston. As Alan has said, I work on market engagement with DXC. Marek will go into a bit more detail about how we are engaging with the market. What I wanted to do to start off with, as I do on most of my calls, is talk about the solution and then talk about some time frames that we are kind of working towards. So, you know, the slide that you see in front of you now are the new central digital services. You know, and when I start talking about this, usually what I do is I kind of highlight, well, look, where has this come from? So, you know, the first thing is, you know, there was a lot of work that had been done in the past around Blueprint 2. This was an aspirational roadmap that was put together by the London market to do three things, really. The first was to digitize our current kind of analog way of working. You know, so, you know, being able to connect the front part of our process with the back part through technology was one of the kind of key deliverables. The second key deliverable is that the way that we work today, we use EDI messages for the back end part of our process, and we realized that, you know, certainly some of the major players in the market elsewhere outside the London market, they use Accord standards and accounting and claims messaging standards, EBOT and ECOT. And from, I would actually think for at least over 10 years, the London market has tried in some way, shape or form to align itself with that way of working. So, you know, that was another attempt of us to be able to, fall in line with global standards. And then finally, what we work on today, some of those old platforms, well, James Livett, I don't know whether James is on the call, but he always reminds me that some of these platforms are 36 years old. So if you think of Posh and Lids, they're 36 years old and are, most probably limiting us in, what we can do around digitization, and they need to be replaced. So those were the kind of, the major areas or the major reasons of why kind of we need to change. So now looking at what the future looks like, you'll see on the kind of left-hand side, you've got getting data right first time. And this is all driven around the standards that I spoke about there. Yeah, so this is creating standards in the London market that mean when we get data in, it's right, and then that allows us to then feed that data all the way through our kind of process or systems that we use. We do use at the front end, there's numerous and various different placing platforms that are used, but the idea is for us to be able to get that data right as early as we can, and then using a digital gateway to take that information into the current into the bureau, what is the bureau services now, but with brand new systems. So you'll see that kind of circle in the middle. There are two new systems, one's IPOS and one's ICOS. IPOS is the brand new International Premium Orchestration System, and ICOS is the International Claims Orchestration System. These are built on the AWS stack. So I think it's pretty hard to do things and say that they're future-proof, but compared to the technology that we're currently on, I think these are about as close as we can get to something that's kind of future-proof. The other part that I would mention is, as you can see at the bottom, all of what we're trying to do is to work within that global standard. So, I know there's lots of good work being done with regards to the CDR at the moment and working with Accord to be able to create a standard for that. With regards to accounting and settlement, there's already some existing standards that have been around for at least 15 years, which is EBOT. And likewise, from the claims perspective, there's the ECOT standard. So that's where we're kind of moving to for the end state. There's numerous and various channels that we can use, but our preferred route is by using the Accord messaging standard. One part that I will mention that I haven't mentioned yet, because I've talked all about end state, is that the program realized that moving directly to an Accord way of working within the timeframes that we've given may be a step too far for everyone, and therefore what we have done is we've built a transition services. So if you look at the kind of bottom right hand blue squares, this is where we are changing the EDI messages at the moment, just some elements of content and where those messages are sent. So today they're being sent to Exchange Engines Gateway. In the future, we'll be sending them to an Accord, to the digital gateway, which has Accord translation services within that gateway, which will then allow, for how we, the way that we kind of submit business today, we have an opportunity to be able to convert that into, the future messages, and they'll be capable to use the new systems as well. So, pretty important stuff, particularly, when it comes to, being able to everybody kind of move on to the new services at the same time. Marek, can you move on, please? So, you know, that was the overall kind of structure of what it is that we want to deliver. Now, you know, like what's on most certainly the service provider's mind is, well, okay, when is all this going to be happening? Yeah. So, you know, we have an overall timeline, but we're building this on an agile basis, and because we're building it on an agile basis and it's so big, we've broken it into sequences. So what you see there are kind of 5 sequences, and this is how we've kind of broken the delivery down. I'll talk about the first 2, which is the delivery that's you know, around the corner. This is the kind of foundational build and the global premium and claim service. And this is, and I want to stress, this is only build completion. This isn't kind of ready to use. This is when we can actually, you know, put the systems into kind of production, but not necessarily be used by anyone at this moment in time, because there's other stuff that we need to build around the technology. But the first sequence is the foundational capability, and this is all about you know, the plumbing and the way the system works, and we're quite a way through there. We should be able to get some sight of what the user portals are going to look like in the not too distant future, which will be great because we'll be able to show you. The second sequence is the global premiums and claims service. And this is generally the backbone of what that new service, what those new services will look like. But it will be based on a kind of peer-to-peer relationship, a little bit like the way a call works today, or those eBot and eCop messages work today. They're kind of peer-to-peer. And what's really good about that is that it gives us opportunities that, whilst it won't be fit for using in the London market per se, it will give us the ability to see what the new systems are going to look like, and it may well give us some ability to start doing some you know, system integration testing with our vendors, so we can start sending messages through that on a test basis, which I think is hugely positive. The next sequence is the London Premium and Claim Service, and this is where you know, this is for Q3 23, and this is where we look at the various differences of the way the London market works, and some of them are listed you know, on the slide, but the main focus here is around the leader and follower functionality, you know, something that doesn't exist outside of Accord today. And we are working extremely close with Accord to be able to build that. In fact, I actually think that there's a meeting at the end of this month with the big group, you know, to talk about, you know, how Sequence 3 and the London Premium and Claim Service is going to work. Then finally, Sequence 4 and 5 that comes later in 2023. This is where we're looking at, you know, the delegated authority part of the process. You know, to date, the way we account is not hugely different to the way we account on open market. However, there's quite a lot of work going on at the front end of delegated authority that we, you know, that if things do change, we want to be in a position to kind of pivot along those lines. And then finally, we have the gateway risk service. So this is, you know, key to the London market, and this is all around building validation around the core data record, you know, tax validation, regulatory checks, and that's scheduled to be built at the end of 2023 as well. You know, with you know, a size of change this big, we think that, you know, for market acceptance testing, we would need at least 6 months of testing, and therefore the date that we've been saying around go live is like we've been saying it's scheduled for the middle of 2024. So that's generally kind of where we are at the moment. You know, I would say we are building this on an agile basis. So, you know, things can change. But, you know, these are the kind of targets that we're aiming towards at the moment. And I think that's me, Marek. You're on silent, mate.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better.
There we are then. Well, I was just keeping quiet, didn't want to disturb you. Thanks very much, Pete. And thanks very much, Alan, for the introduction. Good morning, everybody. My name's Marek Baldi, and I'll be picking up from this point and referring back, obviously, to what Peter said there. Thanks very much for the update. It's I think this is something that is going to be become more and more important as we move through the programme to understand where we are and what's coming next. So in terms of how we're going to communicate that to you, I thought it worthwhile just reviewing a little bit about the whole Blueprint 2 team and what you have available to you and what the market has available to it as well. So what we have is essentially a market readiness team, which Lloyd's created really to ensure consistent messaging from the centre out to managing agents, out to brokers, and obviously with the role I'm fulfilling, it's very much out to yourselves, the vendors and service providers to the London market. We want to make sure that you hear one voice, one message from one team. And you know, we're privileged to have Pete as part of that team as well, because he's so close to what's going on in and around the centre of the development and the joint venture. So what do the team do, and how do we engage with the market? There are 10 engagement communities, affectionately known as the EC10. But what these are essentially communities of 10 to 20 companies. These are either managing agents, as I say, or brokers and vendors. There are 6 carrier communities and 3 broker communities. These have been chosen on the basis of percentage of turnover in the market rather than actual company size. And broadly, these have been gathered together based on their principal system vendor. Now, we're very aware that the companies use many different systems, and so it's a very loose community in terms of technology. And the whole purpose of bringing communities together in this way is so that essentially communities can sort of feed off each other and compare notes with each other and hopefully move forward towards the same goal and towards the end goal of digitizing the market. As Pete said, it's a long journey. There's a lot of moving parts, and we're trying to move companies forward as quickly and as effectively as possible. Some companies are very forward already in terms of their digitization process, their digital agenda, and that's terrific. We want to essentially provide as much information for them as possible. And that's partly on the vendor side, what's my commitment to you is, which is to be certain about what we can be certain about, and obviously in some respects be certain about what we can't be certain about at the minute, so we all know where we are. From a vendor engagement perspective, service provider engagement, what our commitment to you is we're going to provide you with exactly the same resources as the managing agents and brokers, and you get those at the same time. Now, that has, of course, well, that's very different to how it seems to have worked in the past. And I think the major advantage for service providers, vendors in the market, is you get the opportunity to look at the different information that's provided and build that into your discussions with your clients and your prospects. I think there's an opportunity there, but very much so that you're as informed as your clients and your prospects, so that you can have sensible discussions. It's quite possible that you'll actually read the information before your clients or prospects, quite simply because that's your particular interest here, which is what's happening and when. So from an engagement perspective, that's what we'll be doing, and we'll also be running, well, continuing, I should say, because obviously Alan and the team have been running forums up to now, but continuing to run regular update forums such as these, just to make sure everyone's informed and kept up to date. From the perspective of vendors who actually interact with central services. So they perhaps create an IMRC, or they will create an IMRC. They exchange premium claims messages with the central services, or perhaps they consume or produce or consume EDI, or even send and receive bordereau. Then we offer some enhanced services in terms of enhanced engagement, in terms of the opportunity to work with us one-to-one. And essentially that's everything you get from the standard level, but enhanced to have those one-to-one discussions and get invited to more technical forums, I think is the best way to describe it, where we can talk in depth about a particular subject. So those are the different ways we're thinking of engaging with you. And yeah, I'll be just talking about some of those ways in a minute as well. Some of the things that we've been doing.
Sorry, Marek, could I just mention, obviously you've got on the slide here that there's carriers and brokers and communities and managing agents and brokers. Jess, obviously want to highlight that we are of course supporting company market carriers as well as part of this engagement approach. So it's not just the managing agents, it's companies, markets and the brokers too, along with the service providers, just for complete clarity, because it's a London market change.
That's a very good point, Alan. Thanks for pointing that out. Yes, we absolutely support the companies market as well as the Lloyd's market, this as well. So that will be corrected on the slides that we send out next with the pack. In terms of the timeline, this is a relatively new team, and this is something you can find on the market engagement site in terms of where we're going with this. We've just come through just Q2, so we're into Q3 now, where we're launching and aiming to meet and discuss our approach and services with the various communities. I've been fortunate enough to have some discussions already, and what I'm looking to do with any of the companies, any of yourselves who feel it would benefit you, is to have those meetings and discussions one-to-one, and where we can go through the various services and options available to you. As we go forward, we'll be looking to support and monitor how the progress is coming along, how companies and clients are moving towards digitization. So we will be tracking and feeding back aggregated results of that tracking to the market, and so that you're able to then benchmark yourselves against how others in the market are performing. And that will form the basis of some very light questions and some feedback that I'll be seeking from you over time. And that I think will be very important, just so that everyone can get an understanding of how much support is behind this programme. And I think it's fair to say that, having spoken to my colleagues, that there's essentially overwhelming support for the programme, and we're looking forward very much to delivering this as a market initiative. So yeah, so that's how we'll be moving forward. In terms of helping you through this process, we've already built and provided some key artifacts. These are in terms of provided in terms of packs, and these are customer journeys, the benefit frameworks, and foundational playbooks. Hopefully, if you're on this webinar, you've also been on the list of people to receive these, which have been sent out as either PDFs or PowerPoint presentations. And they're really key, I think, to helping people understand how the new central services function, how the new customer journeys in particular go through, how the different central services take people and messaging through the whole process. The benefits framework is something that we're looking to provide for the companies, the practitioners, to understand and assess how these changes are going to impact the business and how they build the business case. And the foundational playbooks are very much how to take things forward in terms of the what and the how to do things. If we look a little bit more at the customer journeys, this is broken down into a number of sections focusing on the digital gateway, how the role that will play, the premium submissions, and also the claims and faster claims payment for delegated authorities. So this is very much key to looking at the next level of detail in the whole digital services picture that Peter put up a bit earlier. And this very much takes you through the different ways of interacting with the digital gateway, either via eBot messages, perhaps via an API message, or even via a portal. And the different ways then that the journeys, that the messages through those ways of working can actually progress through the system. Talks very much in detail about the way the different layers of moving through the system will build on each other, how the different levels of validation and query reporting and error messages will be actually used in the system, and how they'll communicate back to the message originators. So it's very important and very useful for you to take a look through those. And I'll offer anyone who wishes to, then we can go through those in more detail if you'd like to have that that journey explained a little bit better. From the benefits framework, this, as I said, is a little bit softer in terms of we don't put any numbers in here, absolute numbers. This is very much around getting people to think about different areas of their business, about how things will potentially for themselves be better, faster, cheaper, and essentially taken across all different areas that we've identified in terms of the digital transition pathways, the gateway itself, premium services, claims, and delegated authority, faster claims payments. So this is something very much aimed at the participants, and where I think for service providers, vendors, there's an opportunity very much to open the conversation, that dialogue with clients and prospects to see and really understand what this could mean for them. I think there's a whole host of conversations that could come off the back of these particular slides and the information there, where you've got an opportunity to explore different areas and see what companies are doing. For the communities that we've identified, certainly, I think it's fair to say most of the companies there, the organisations, have identified Blueprint 2 champions, or at least people who with that as part of their responsibility. And so those will be certainly set up inside the organisations to be aware of what's going on and certainly have those conversations. And so there should be somebody you'd be able to talk to in those organisations about this, if you're not already talking to them today.
Just one question in before you move on, Marek. So Darren's asked around the customer journeys. Are these draft or final versions?
Pete said these are versions that are current at the moment, what we know at the moment, and are subject to change. But essentially, the principles behind what's happening in these customer journeys are as we are aware at the moment. So, yeah.
Marek, can I just add a little bit? Yeah. So out of the artifacts that you've seen, the kind of the customer journeys and the implementation playbook are I would say they're draft, they are flexible. Yeah, at the end of the day, they are where they are at the position of time of what we know, because we wanted to come out and at least give people an opportunity to see, where we are, the direction of travel. With regards to the benefits, it's a little bit less flexible, because what we've actually done is we've just gone and said, look, we've looked at all the different opportunities that there are to, get value from what we're doing, and we've categorized those into cheaper, faster, better. There may well be, if we've missed, I think there was about 120 different, benefit levers. So if we've missed stuff out, we're more than happy to add, without a shadow of a doubt. But, some of these artifacts are a little bit more solid than others, mainly because, as I say, we are building this on a kind of agile basis, and, some things could change. Sorry,
Thanks,
Marek.
Alan. Yeah, no, that's right. Thanks, Pete, as well. That's important to reinforce, I think. The artifacts are, as I guess, only based on what we know at the time. So as the system, as the whole program is being built on an agile basis, exactly, it can change. And I think that's part of the value of these ongoing communication and making sure that we update you regularly in the forum. So so I hope you do take part and you do join in the forums, certainly for the updates and hopefully for the more deeper dives as well, as and when they're appropriate to you. Back on from we've looked at the customer journeys, the benefit statements. The most recent set of artifacts that we sent out was the foundational playbooks. In this case, it was for managing agents, and I'm sure that it's valuable for carriers in the company markets as well. The playbook that's been provided at the moment, there will be one for the brokers that's just being finalised as we speak. That should be released in the next week or so. They're considerable documents, and they do cover an awful lot of topics. The one that was sent out most recently, I sent out, that's got 90 plus pages in it. And what that says to me is that it's very comprehensive. I think from a service provider's perspective, or certainly from a company that's perhaps not so familiar with the London market, you might find this particular section, the impact of various functions on business processes, might be very enlightening for you. It is in itself considerable, but it goes into some detail about each of the various parts, moving parts, if you like, of the whole digital services and in the centre. And I think that can be a very valuable way of looking at what's going on, certainly just to understand what might impact your own offering, or even present some opportunities for you to look at new offerings that you might be able to build in to your propositions.
Marek, can I also add that we are talking to the other associations around creating or working on something similar for the either the broker or the company carrier community, but so watch this space.
That's absolutely right, Pete, and I think that it's also important to acknowledge that this actually was put together by the LMA, and we provided it there. We'll provide a link to the LMA website with details of where you can find this online, along with other links and resources. Finally, what I wanted to touch on pretty much was what's been happening slightly to the side, if you like. The faster claims payment, the new funding and payment solution for delegated authority, which is produced in partnership with Vitesse. I think that might be worth definitely looking at if delegated authority is something that you provide in your proposition suite. That's definitely there. That's been announced with some as going ahead now. They're getting organisations signed up to that and looking at different ways of taking that forward. But that's definitely on the move. The IMRC market consultation, Intelligent Market Reform Contract, run by Limos. The consultation closed last Friday, and if you'd like to keep up to date with what's happening there'll be a link in the pack that we send out as a PDF of this presentation to you all, so you can keep track of what's happening there. In terms of what's coming up next from ourselves, as Pete mentioned, there'll be more artifacts with foundational playbooks for the company's market and for brokers. We'll be looking to provide those. We've got the next vendor forum, which will focus on EDI changes to look out for. That will be in mid-October. So if you're in the position where you either produce or receive and process EDI messages, that'll be something where we'll be working off the back of the announcements around EDI, which those we're expecting to come out at the end of this month, early October, And then what we'll do is we'll bring in some subject matter experts on EDI who will be able to guide you through those changes. In terms of gathering together all the resources that I mentioned, the artifacts and other resources, then we'll be shortly announcing a Blueprint 2 website. It's simply a resource bank, if you like, with downloadable artifacts, everything that you've seen and you've already received, but maybe you want to provide to others. Links to other reference material, useful material, and potentially we can have, we will have there the FAQs, the frequently asked questions that we'll be gathering from the market and making available. So hopefully that'll provide a very valuable resource to answer questions if for any reason you need an answer quicker than we can respond, which hopefully won't be always the case. But in terms of the FAQs, we very much encourage you to ask questions, very much encourage you to use this query form, which is available, obviously put together very simply for either use on the web. You've got the bit.ly link there, BP2-FAQ, or you've got the QR code, which will take your phone to the form there. Very much hope you'll use that. It enables us to collate all the questions and produce the FAQ, which we will then, as I say, circulate via the website and or make available. And hopefully then we've already had a number of questions come in, so it's not empty at the minute. And as soon as we've got the website up and live, we'll be working to get the FAQ out there as well. So I think with that, we've come pretty much to the end of the session today. It just does leave me to thank Alan and Pete for their contribution today, and for Alan for manning the fort, if you like, up to today. And I suppose put out there any questions that we can deal with at the minute.
Yeah, so just whilst you've been talking, Marek, Matt's kindly put in a link to the foundational playbook on the LMA website, and Duncan's asked if there can be a link to the customer journey and benefit frameworks documents. So we'll make sure that they're in the pack that's distributed, some link to make those accessible. I think they've been sent previously, but having a link in a central place will be really welcome. And obviously when that Blueprint 2 website comes, everything will be together on that site. Just looking to see if there's any more questions in the chat. I am just going to pick on a couple of things. So obviously you've mentioned the next session mid-October, looking at EDI messaging. So some of the questions that we kind of generally get from the service provider community is things like, such as, when will the EDI specifications be available? So will that mid-October session deal with that, or will they come after?
I think it'll be a lot clearer in mid-October when those specifications will be available. So yes, we'll be able to update you on those as we will with all the specifications, as and when they become available. I think one of the key things that I'm picking up on what Pete touched on earlier in terms of market acceptance testing. There's a whole series of events that need to take place before we get anywhere near market acceptance testing, which, as Pete did allude to as well, includes vendor integration testing, and also in some respects what I would call feasibility testing, where we have, and I think Pete touched on this, some key clients, sort of market participants and their vendor partners looking to send and test out the whole messaging process. So we are engaging with the market participants to look at how we could take that forward. But all that is dependent on there being specifications available and timelines for those systems being available. And as vendors, that sort of information is critical for you to be able to understand what you have to do and by when. So this is all part of what we're trying to do with this level of this line of communication.
Great, thanks. Another question in from George this time. Will you be able to access IPOS and ICOS via API rather than solely through the digital gateway?
So the short answer to that is yes. The customer journeys slide deck does show very clearly that there will be 3 ways to access the systems. One will be via Accord messaging, one will be via APIs, and one will be via a portal, as Pete alluded to in the sequences.
Marek, I think so. But I think the idea is that they link into the portal, into the gateway. Yeah, but I tell you what, this is one of those. It's a great question. You know, please, we most probably need to come back, because it most probably needs more than, we need to check with the build team and that kind of stuff. So, with this one, I would definitely put that in, use the barcode and whatever and ask that question. So we need, as I say, we'll need to be able to, answer that properly. But I think at the moment the intention was to go through the gateway. But let's get back to you. And I think we've got another one here around the formalised framework, Tim.
Correct. So yeah, it's how will they formalise a framework for vendor testing, the assessment part? So I suppose probably when will you get to that formalised approach, and what might that look like? You mentioned about vendor integration testing.
We're just to let you know, like with all these things, we're working on, pulling up a proposal as to what that might look like. And there's a fair amount of governance that we kind of need to go through in order to do that. But as I say, watch this space. I think the idea is, as Marek said, we'll provide you, with a schedule of when some of the information will come out. Hopefully, though, I would say in the not too distant future, we will have more that we can communicate to you around, that kind of testing, particularly around the earlier opportunity to test, as opposed to waiting until the end build date of sequence 5.
Okay, thank you. Looking at additional questions, Mark's come in with, if a service provider didn't do anything, they didn't prepare for transitional or digital end state, when would the existing messaging approach for ANS and e-accounts stop working? So I think that's a fairly straightforward question. Marek, do you want to just pick up on the answer of that one?
I think what we can be certain of is the existing services will be switched off. The transitional services are designed to pick those services up, and how and when those transitional services or how they look and how you're going to use them will become clearer as we move forward. But the principles about how they'll be used are made very clear in the customer journeys. As yet, we're aiming towards starting those in Q1 24. Second half of 24, with MAT starting in Q1 24. So, we're very much hoping that people are going to be moving along with us on this journey and moving along with the market, which is obviously very keen on doing this.
And what we've been saying to your customers is there is no change option. Yeah. The minimum that you can do to be able to work with the new systems is get to transitional. Yeah, so I think there's most probably a wider question there, and it's not, I don't necessarily think it's for us that are building the solution to answer. I think whether ANS and e-accounts would stop working, that is actually something that the associations and the market will collaborate on, as to say, well, when should these ways of working be switched off? So again, we will be working really closely with the associations to be able to come back with something on that. But there is, just to reiterate, there is no change option.
I think that's absolutely right. Yeah.
Thanks. And you said you were targeting we're targeting mid 2024 really for the transitional services to kick in, assuming everything goes to build accordingly in line with the agile delivery timeline. Yeah.
That's right. That's absolutely right. I think we're trying to move everyone towards there, and people will move at different paces, as will you know, the market participants. We've had some who are saying, well, we're ready to send e-bot messages today, but obviously the central services aren't there. And we've got others who are saying, well, if we do nothing, what happens next? We're looking to bring everyone together on this journey, and obviously people will move at different paces. So when you need help, if you need help, reach out. We're very much here to help, and we're very keen to help you on with your journey.
Okay, thanks. Just conscious of time.
Yes, I was just about to say, I think we're about
just
done for time today.
There was probably just one final question around quality control for vendor feedback for the different stages of specifications. Do you foresee quality control feedback from vendors as part of that process? And I think you've answered the final one whilst you're thinking the answer around that there will be different versions of the playbook for brokers and potentially a company market as well. And this is the final question just to wrap up on the quality control from vendors.
On the quality control from vendors, I think absolutely. I think there's no reason why vendors shouldn't get involved in this. I think you know, we've had a lot of very good feedback in terms of the information that's been made available. We've had that feedback already. I very much encourage you to do that. And a great example of that was the IMRC consultation, which went out to market participants. And I'm sure that feedback would have come via your clients, via your customers to you. And I do encourage you very much to get engaged. I don't know, Pete, if we've got plans to include vendors in terms of quality control and the market feedback on various parts of the programme. That might be the case. I suppose it remains to be seen.
Well, I think, you know, the current version of what we did when we sent out the specifications originally for proportional treaty absolutely showed, you know, that we have taken feedback on board, and we'll make that part of our, you know, our kind of future update. So absolutely, you know, we need to, like, you know, I think this only works if we work as a market. You know, so the view of, you know, having and overall, you know, the importance for us is to have the IT service providers, you know, engaged in this whole process, yeah, because we realise the value and the importance of what you provide into, you know, the way these changes are going to need to work. So I absolutely see there being a kind of two-way response. What I would say is eventually we need to come to a landing though on these certain things. So I'm not saying that, you know, everything that's responded to, you'll get a like, you know, like, you know, yep, we'll do that kind of answer back. You know, the whole idea is that we create kind of a standard way of working, you know, and we need to make sure that we kind of agree and stick to a standard. So, you know,
just in the interest of times, we're over time now, so I think that was the last question for this session. If you've got any more, you've seen Marek's contact details on the last slide. So really it just leaves me to thank our presenters, Peter, Marek, who will be holding the forum going forward, and to you for joining today. So hopefully you found that a useful session, and look forward to hearing your questions and queries through the portal and joining next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.